Look at that.
Welcome, everybody. This is the DVMUG Zoom meeting for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. And we have a special guest today. This is going to be have Jason Snell from Take Control Books and also Six Colors and many other things. He's going to talk about his new fourth edition of his book, Take Control of Photos. So take it away, Jason.
Well, thank you. I have no slides because I'm still conflicted about whether slides make sense for Zoom presentations.
Stop my
Um,
share. There we go.
so yeah, so the idea here is that I wrote a new version of my book, which you are welcome to buy if you like. I think if you bought a previous version, you can there's probably a discount you get on the new edition, and there will be a new version of that edition that'll come out as a free update about Apple Intelligence, which I will talk about a little bit. Um, but I mean, Photos is one of the most important parts of the Apple ecosystem, I would argue. It is an app that is doing lots of tasks. Um, and that's actually what I wanted to start with is what Photos is for. Because I think one of the challenges that Apple has faced is that they've been building one app to do, especially you could say two very specific tasks. And it's a little bit more than that, but I think they start with these two different kinds of tasks. And if you go back far enough, you can say there's this sort of iPhoto task, which is iPhoto before it became Photos on the Mac was the place that you connected your digital camera, and then later it imported from your iPhone, but it started out with digital cameras, and it was the shoebox. Steve Jobs always said, and the idea was to get all of your digital camera photos in one place, so that you could organize them, process them, and edit them, and do all those things with them. And then separately, there was the camera app and the adjunct to the camera app, which was the camera roll or the original Photos app on the iPhone. And the idea there was you had images that you took on your iPhone and you needed to look at them and edit them and send them and delete them and do all of those things. So they're really two different, entirely different conceptions. And maybe, less than a decade ago, the Apple really started in earnest to merge them together. They renamed the iPhoto app on the Mac into Photos, the same name as it was on iOS, and they started to merge them together. In fact, that first version of Photos they built before there was Catalyst, before there were iPad apps running on the Mac. They actually wrote code in that first version of Photos so they built a system that let them reuse some of their iOS stuff on the Mac way back then because they wanted to repurpose some of the work they had done on the iPhone and put it on the Mac. Just for their own purposes, like years before they did Catalyst, which let you bring iPad apps to the Mac. So they've been on a collision course. And I can tell you, as somebody who 10 years ago was approached by Joe Kissel of Take Control to write this book, um, I have every year I spend my summer looking. I mean, this year, I'll just tell you, I'm sitting at WWDC, surrounded in folding chairs on the lawn at Apple Park, uh, surrounded by my colleagues in the press, all of whom know that I have this book. And then they show like we've completely redesigned Photos, and they all turn to look at me and go, "No, your summer is ruined now." Because every summer, that is the thing, is if there's a lot, I got to update the book. And I have to dive in and I have to try everything in it. And there was a big change this year. But I have watched over the years as Apple has made changes, and really what they've done, culminating, I would say, a year or two ago, and causing me to completely reorganize this book, by the way, which started out as a book about Photos for Mac with little, and then I added little sidebars about iPad and iPhone. And over time, it has evolved as these apps have evolved to become a single thing. Because a couple of years ago, Apple really reached the point where Photos on the Mac and iPad and iPhone was basically the same. A few features different, but mostly the same. So all these sections of the book that used to be, here's how you do this on the Mac, here's how you do this on the iPad, became here's how you do this, because they were close enough that I could say, click here on the Mac and iPhone or iPad, but basically it's the same. This year, of course, they made some changes that are more on the iPad and the iPhone than on the Mac. So I had to back out of that a little bit in a couple of places. But my point is that these two use cases, these two platforms, touch and Mac, have collided and merged and affected each other. And I would argue that this is the year that you really feel it. And you feel it in a very particular way, which is the changes they made to iPad and iPhone Photos app in iOS 18 and iPadOS 18. And if you haven't used it, I will describe what's going on. If you have used it, you know what I'm talking about, which is when you tap the icon to launch photos on iPad or iPhone in iOS 18, you don't see what you used to see, which was a grid of all your photos in your photo library and then some tabs at the bottom. I should say, one of the ways that this all evolved, right, is that they introduced iCloud Photos one year, which allows you to sync all your photos. So now, camera roll, first you imported from your camera roll on your Mac, and then iCloud Photos happened, and then just all your devices can see all the photos, and it's a single shared photo library. And then they added photo sharing so you can share with somebody else. So it keeps evolving. But the primary way you viewed photos on the iPhone and the iPad was a grid. You tap the app, a grid of recent photos and screenshots and whatever else appears. Um, and then there's some tabs at the bottom that do other stuff. But that was the experience. And for good reasons that I will talk about in a second, Apple decided to break that experience and completely change what happens when you launch the app. And that their betas over the summer, if people do the betas, they made some changes that were a little more extreme and they kind of backed off from that. But where we ended up, and the thing that everybody is getting now, is when you launch photos, you get sort of two things in one. The top 2/3 ish of the screen is the grid, and the bottom third of the screen are these things called collections, and they're both visible. And what Apple has really done is has taken collections is a whole bunch of stuff that used to be behind one of those tabs. And Apple is saying this stuff's important too. It's not just about the grid. This other stuff is important too. So let me back up a second. We're talking about Apple Intelligence a lot these days because Apple is about to launch those Apple Intelligence features and they're selling it in TV ads and there are a bunch of they just updated the iPad mini to do and did nothing to it other than put a chip in it that supports Apple Intelligence because it's important for them to get everything to support Apple Intelligence. Great. Truth is, just between us, Apple's been doing AI, machine learning, for like a decade now, primarily in the Photos app. Because for years now, the Photos app, because like when I started doing digital photos, I manually tagged everything. Who's in this photo? Where is this photo taken? All of that. For years now, Apple and the Photos app have been able to analyze every single photo in your library and say, this has got a beach in it, this has got snow in it, this has got a dog in it, this has got a cat in it, this has a zebra in it, this has a horse in it, this has this person and this person and this person because I can recognize faces. All of that stuff is in there. That all uses machine learning technology. I really believe it's one of the reasons that Apple started building the neural engine in their processors to begin with, which has turned out to have a huge benefit for them because it means that so many of their devices are built to do AI stuff because they were performing millions of operations on every photo you took on your iPhone because you take the photo, not only do you take the photo and it takes 8 different photos and analyzes them and merges them together and makes one picture, but after it does that and it saves it to the library, it's not done because then it analyzes the contents of that image and tags it with all of those tags of this has got a sunset, this has got this person's face, this has a dog, this is at a beach. And it does all of that too, and it identifies all of that. It's all machine learning based. The reason Apple's been doing that and has invested so much time and energy in it and has tilted how they design computer chips and led them to the point where they are capable of embracing AI stuff with Apple Intelligence is Apple's belief that if you've got hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, I think I'm almost at 100,000 photos and videos in your iCloud photo library or in your photos library if you're not using iCloud. You got to have them there for a reason, right? This is the whole point is if you've got tens, let's say, of thousands of photos, presumably you have them because you would like to look at them or be reminded of something that happened in the past or share them with friends and family. You want to get at them, but the more of them you have, the harder it is to get at them because there's just a swamp of images, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, whatever. Lots, too many for any person to go through. If it were books, right back in the day, we we had prints and you put them in books, and so you were curating it down to a very small number. Now you go out for a walk with your dog and you take 40 photos and they just live forever in your photo library. Well, how do you sort through all of that? So Apple builds all these machine learning techniques, and the idea was if you search for pictures of the dog, you can find pictures of a dog. And as of last year, pictures of that dog, because as of last year they added pets to people, so it's now called People and Pets, and it recognizes faces and animals. Pretty amazing. So this is the concept is Apple wants to do all this work because it wants to be able to present photos to you that you might be delighted by and make it easier for you to find photos that you want to find based on any content, time, location, all these different parameters on every photo in your library. And the only way to do that is machine learning. As somebody who tagged thousands of photos in, I think iView multimedia is what I used at the time, when I literally, there's a picture of my wife and kids, and I would click on every one of them, or I'd select a bunch and I'd drag it into her name and then drag it onto my daughter's name, then drag it onto my son's name, then drag it onto my name. I'd do that for every photo in my library. And then Apple introduced faces and I stopped. And that's why they did it. So I say this because that's the other impulse that Apple's trying to serve in redesigning the Photos app is if you launch to a grid of photos in the Photos app and all it shows you is little squares of the 25 most recent photos you've taken on your iPhone, what you're not seeing is all the other stuff that's in your library. And I think Apple decided recent images in my library is a reason to launch the Photos app, but it's not the only reason. And I think they realized, and I think they're right, lots of people never looked at the tabs that had all of this other stuff in it, where they were doing favorites and memories and featured photos and all these things that were using the machine learning stuff to float up interesting pictures that you might be delighted by from your collection. So they decided they would just get rid of the tabs and put this weird, weird interface on the top level, which is essentially two different interfaces, one on top of the other. And the way it works, if you haven't tried it, is, if you want to see the grid, you just sort of swipe down and then you just kind of go all the way into the grid mode. So the grid's in the top part and you just kind of swipe to keep going. And now you're in the classic kind of like just, I don't need, I think the attitude there is very much like, hey, phone, I don't need your help. I just need to find that picture that I took 5 minutes ago or yesterday. Very utilitarian. And I think a lot of the criticism the Photos app gets is from people who are very utilitarian. They're just used to the utilitarian nature of the Photos app. But the other part is collections. And I think it's unfair, and some people will do this. They will say that, oh, Apple's just put all this garbage down there where their dumb machine learning algorithms come up with these stupid suggestions of things. And, I if I want to find a photo, I'll find it myself and I don't want to worry about it. And I can see, some people are going to have that worldview. I would argue that a bunch of the items that are in the collections view are utilitarian. Like the top item by default in the collections view that you see down below is called recent days. And all it is every day in the past, week or two that you've taken photos has a little box with a thumbnail for that day. And it's very utilitarian. It allows you to swipe to last Thursday and tap and see all the photos you took that day. instead of having to go back and say, when did I take this? And look at the little squares and go, is that last Thursday? No, that was. So it's actually, I think, better than the grid, a little less simple, but better in some ways. And then below that in the collections view are all of these other kind of amazing ways to find your photos. They will generate suggested photos. They will show your favorites if you favorited photos. There's a new feature this year that's called trips, where it's using geodata, because if you use an iPhone or an iPad, every photo you take is geotagged with a GPS coordinate. So it knows exactly where you are. And then they've got Apple Maps database. They know where those locations are. And then all those photos have a time code. They know when they were taken. And from that, Apple extrapolates. And so my wife and I went to Scotland this summer. And when we got back, I mean, even while we were going, it actually generated it while we were going. I've got a little thing that says Scotland. And then we went to London. So it's like it says United Kingdom 2024. And all our pictures from our trip are in there because it knows we went to the UK and we were there for 10 days or whatever. And it knows the time and it knows the span. If I go for a weekend up to like the wine country or something, it knows and it'll generate it. That's really useful. It's really useful that it has broken that out for you. And so it's doing that in a bunch of different ways. It's got people and pets. Another new feature this year is groups. I used to, and this is in the book, I used to say, how do you get a list? For me, it was always the Christmas card photo. How do you get a list of every photo that I've taken with me in it and my wife in it and my son in it and my daughter in it? Well, it used to be the answer was you've got to use the Mac. You've got to make a smart album. You've got to have four variables, basically four items, all of which must be true. And it's photo contains Jason, photo contains Lauren, photo contains, et cetera, et cetera. And then I press OK and I look and I'm like, geez, we had 4 pictures this year of all of us together. It's not, and then I start planning another family vacation. But now in the people and pets part of photos, you can create a group and you can say these people, and then you can give it a name if you want, a custom name for that, what that group signifies. And then, it stays there. And now you've got a group that you tap and it's on iPhone and iPad and Mac, and it will show you all the photos with all 4 of those people in it. So another really great thing in the collections view. They used to have a thing called Memories. Memories is still there. Memories is like a thing, a collection built by Apple. And this is that sort of like Apple wants to find things that you might find nice. Basically, it's like, here's a thing. It could be like trips you've taken to the beach, or it might be the ones that make me laugh are like October 14th in history. And it's like, it was just a day, random selection, but it's trying to come up with things that might please you because again, that stuff is great, but why do I have it if I never see it? I mean, I have 100,000 photos, but if I never look at them, why did I even bother taking them? As a side note, there are other places where Apple is surfacing this stuff that are amazing too, that I'll get to later. But to continue about collections, the other thing Apple did this year that I think is really brilliant is they didn't just put all those collections in one place. They didn't just make it so it's customizable. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Photos app, you can choose customize, and it'll let you customize what appears and in what order in the collections interface. So if you're very utilitarian, you get the utility stuff up to the top, which is like recent days, and here are all my screenshots, and here are all my, by media type, videos and panoramas, and you have the ability to do all of that. If you are less utilitarian and you want it to be more about favorites or pets or whatever, you can actually do that, and that works too. You can move those up to the top and have those be higher priority. So you have lots of options for customizability as well. And then the other thing that they did that I thought was really clever about collections is collections basically behave the same. it used to be featured photos were one thing and memories were a different thing and people albums were a different thing. And they all kind of, trust me, as somebody who had to write a book about how they all worked a little bit differently, sometimes a lot differently. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is a memory. So it does this thing and generates a movie and all this stuff. So what Apple did is they took the memory concept, which was a curated collection of photos on a theme. So not all of them, because you take 40 pictures on the beach of one scene. You don't need to see all 40. So it analyzes that group and it makes a smaller group that hits the highlights. That was what memories did. And then if you wanted to see them all, you could say show all and then it would show, instead of showing you 26 photos, it would show you 80 photos or whatever. And it would also automatically generate a movie. So it would make a slideshow. So it's using live photos, videos, and stills, and it would generate a movie using, again, basically a machine learning model. So AI before it was called that and fancy and Apple Intelligence and all of that. Just regular old machine learning. And so you could watch that, and it was like a little on the fly slideshow of whatever collection that they did. So now in photos, every collection is that. Every collection can generate a movie, has a curated collection, but you can also choose to view all of them. So you can it's consistent. You know what you're going to get. And I think it's really helpful because it's not going to show you 90 copies of the same thing. It's going to try to make it a little slimmed down, but you can see it all if you want to. And that the movie generation is really clever. I think they do a good job. So that's the big interface change, is that they've got the grid at the top and the collections at the bottom. And it can be very jarring when you launch it, although I think you can get over it really fast, because for me, I also feel like I have two things. Sometimes I'm in the Photos app and I want to browse, and other times in the Photos app, I want to, tactically, I just need to find this screenshot that I just took and airdrop it to myself or something, right? Like, and you can do both of those things from there. But there's just so much uh that you can do. Another collection that's in there that's interesting is there's a wallpapers collection, and it's literally analyzing your library for images that it thinks would be good to use as wallpapers on your iPhone or your iPad. And it's pretty good, right? Like they've obviously trained it to like have an eye for certain kinds of images that would be good. And then literally you can tap on them and it takes you to the wallpapers interface and it saves it as your wallpaper. It's incredibly clever. So I talked about other ways that you can use your photos. Saving wallpapers is one of them. It's a feature that's actually been out for, I think it's for 2 years on iPhone and 1 year on iPad, but they've made some updates to it this year too. And I want to promote it because I think not enough people know about it, and it's amazing. So remember, they introduced the ability to customize your lock screen on iOS, and now you can do it on iPadOS as well. One of the things you can do to customize your lock screen is you can choose a photo shuffle. And the photo shuffle can be driven by very specific things in photos, like faces. An example I'll give you is um, I set this up for my wife where her phone now shuffles through pictures of our kids. And it's amazing because it's using that 100,000 digital photos, the first of which were shot with the camera we bought when our daughter was born. So it's got our kids' entire lives, and it's not random, right? Because the machine learning is analyzing the photos and saying we think this is a photo that you might want to see, but it's analyzing among thousands of photos of our kids, right? You can imagine out of 100,000 photos, how many of them must be of our children. And every day, you can set it to like every hour or every wake up, but I think she's got it every day. Every day she is delighted. And I'm serious, it's been more than a year. Every day she is delighted when she taps on her phone to wake it up, and there's a new picture of one of our kids. Because so many of those photos, even the ones that are famous, like there's a photo that we took of our son when we were at this corn maze, and it's really adorable, and it was on our calendar that we printed, and it's it's in a book that we printed, and it's just, everybody knows about it, and it's great. But then, like, it'll surface another photo from that day that we're not familiar with, that shows him in a different pose or shows him with his sister, and it's really magical. So I highly recommend, if you have, and you can also do it like landscapes, and it will look at your library and only have landscapes. So you can choose nature, you can choose cities. There are lots of they're like a bunch of different things you can choose and have them shuffle through on your lock screen. So good. Such a good feature. Such a great way to rediscover old photos that you forgot about. So the wallpaper feature, the lock screen feature, that's what they're trying to do, is get you to recognize or see this stuff. I'll also put in a plug for widgets. Photos has a really great set of widgets on iOS and iPadOS, where it will highlight photos for you there. So like the lock screen, but like just on your home screen with other widgets. Really nice feature. You choose what it shows in that. You can choose from an album, you can choose a shuffle. Really well done. And then the last one I want to plug here is Apple Watch Face. There's a Photos Apple Watch Face. The best thing to do is to start it on your phone in the Watch app, but you can choose photos or have it choose photos for you and make an Apple Watch face out of it. And those also can shuffle. And in a speaking of updates this year, one of the big updates this year is the Apple Watch photos face is dramatically better. It's not perfect, but it's way better. So it's first off, it analyzes the photo and figures out what's the right cropping to fit it on an Apple Watch, because the Apple Watch shape is totally different from the shape of the photo. Whether it's horizontal or vertical, the Apple Watch is pretty square. So it's analyzing, like, where are the people in it and where should I crop it to get them to fit. It analyzes where the subject is. It does that subject detection thing, like portrait mode, to figure out like where the person is. I'm gonna just as because I'm gonna say like this subject detection, right? Where they've Apple's got some really good algorithms that detect that I'm here and that the rest of it is the background, and it can replace it. So what it does on Apple Watch is it uses that subject detection to decide, one, where it puts the time, so it's not over the face of the person on the watch if it can help it. Sometimes it's over the face, but it tries really hard. So it'll like put it over here, or it'll put it over here, put it up here if it can, put it down here if it can. Try not to get it right over the face. It can change the size of it variably of the time. So it'll make, it needs to be a little smaller. It does that dynamically too. Again, it's not perfect. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And it does the thing that you'll also see on the lock screen, where um, if you've got a photo of a person, but it can also be a landscape, and it detects kind of like the depth effect, it will put like the time, so it's kind of behind their head a little bit, like the time is sitting behind them with a little cutout, which is just such a great effect. I discovered this on my iPad, where I have a lock screen of a landscape in Scotland from when we were there, and I realized the time is just a little bit behind the mountains. Just the bottom of the numbers of the time is just behind the peaks of the mountains in the Highlands in Scotland. And even funnier, when you swipe up to unlock the iPad, the numbers slide up and go out so that you see them as they go out. It's totally unnecessary, but it's great. Did a good job. And again, it's a friend of mine uses a watch face for pictures of his wife, and they shuffle through, and he loves that they look good and they're surprising, and that you can still see the time and it's placed properly. It's just another one of these areas that Apple has I think done a great job. Because one of the goals, this is just philosophically, if there's anything you take away from this talk, philosophically, why do you have tens of thousands of photos if you're not looking at them, if you're not reminded of them? And I know it's a chore to like forcibly go back through them. That's why Apple has spent lots and lots of time and money building machine learning algorithms to try and find ways to float that stuff up to you based on randomness or based on you saying, show me pictures of this person and being able to do it. In addition, search is vastly better in photos now. It used to be you could search for stuff, but it was kind of like this really finicky interface where you type the name and it would try to autocomplete, and you had to click on that name and it would make a little box with that name in it. And then you try to type something else, sort of like searching in the Finder. They have really reached the point now where you can just type in the search box in Photos on Mac or iPad or iPhone. I did one that was, my daughter's name is Jamie. I did Jamie on the beach in Hawaii. I just typed Jamie on the beach in Hawaii. Instantly, all the pictures of Jamie on the beach in Hawaii. Just, I didn't have to think about it. And then if you said Jamie on the beach in Hawaii in 2019, done in 2019. So you want to search for a year or a time or a date and then constrain it with people, you can just do that and it does a really good job. I found in most cases it does a really good job doing searches like that. So highly recommend doing embracing the fact that if you need to find a photo, Photos might be able to find it for you. Now, it's not perfect. I have an album in my Photos library called Photos Thinks These Are Dogs that contains pictures of horses and cows and goats and sheep and cats and some dogs. It's not perfect, but it's gotten better over time. And it sure beats, like, if you're like, oh, I wonder if I've taken a photo of a zebra. And you're like, when was that? And you're scanning and you've got 90,000 photos. Like, you're never going to find that zebra. I tell this story because I assumed I was using it as an example in the book. I assumed I had no photos of zebras, and it turned out I had 8 photos of zebras. I had photos of zebras at a zoo and photos of zebras at Hearst Castle. I was like, who knew? The photos knew. I didn't know, but photos knew. So embrace the searching in photos. Now, so Apple Intelligence is coming. It's coming next week, probably, it sounds like. There are some Apple Intelligence features in Photos. So again, these are features that Apple has basically gated by hardware. Apple Intelligence features means you've got to not only have macOS 15.1 or iOS or iPadOS 18.1 coming out next week, but you've got to have an Apple Silicon Mac, or you've got to have an iPad with an M series processor, or you've got to have an iPhone or iPad new this week with an A17 Pro or A18 or better processor. So it's a limited list, unless you're a Mac user, which the Mac, every Mac sold since 2020, basically. What's new in Apple Intelligence? It's a few things. First off, if you would like Apple Photos to make a movie about anything arbitrarily, it's basically a collection about anything arbitrarily based on text, you can do that. So you actually type in Jamie on the beach in Hawaii, and it will generate a movie of pictures of my daughter on the beach in Hawaii over the years, and it on demand. So instead of it having like a thing where every day it floats up great things that happen on October 22nd, or having fun with pets, you can tell it, no, I want this, and it will generate that. So that's interesting and it's pretty cool. But the best feature that they added, and I don't love that it's tied to Apple Intelligence because I think they could have added this a long time ago, and I don't know why they didn't, is there's a proper cleanup feature in Photos. There was a little bit of a healing brush feature in Photos on the Mac before. Wasn't very good. It was sort of functional. The cleanup feature that's coming that uses Apple Intelligence is on all those platforms. So Mac, iPad, iPhone, and it's very good. So that's, if you've got something in the background that you don't want to be there, you could scribble over it with your finger. You could circle it. You can click on it. And it uses AI to guess at what is back there and backfill. And it does a pretty good job. It's not perfect, but like I had a picture of my daughter on the beach in Hawaii with these 2 dudes standing in the waves behind her, and I went, and they're gone. And that was it. That was all there was to it. There are apps that do this now. There's been an iPad app called Photomator that I've been recommending for like 5 years that does this. I don't know why it took this long. I don't know why it took Apple Intelligence, but at least it's there. So going forward, it'll be very easy to clean up a photo in the Photos app. Um, so that's the big stuff with Apple Intelligence. I should mention, even though it's not quite photos, that iPhone 16 and 16 Pro introduced this whole new photographic styles thing, which is completely different from the thing that they used to have called photographic styles. It kind of replaces the old effects that they had where you could do like Instagram style effects inside photos. Basically, if you're editing a photo taken on an iPhone 16 with the latest versions of photos on any device, if the photo was taken on an iPhone 16, you will be able to edit it using that new photographic styles interface, which lets you sort of like, it's got basically, it's doing something really clever if you haven't heard about this, where when you take photos with the iPhone 16, you can set a style, but it saves all the data in the background. So the idea there is you could say, I want to take a black and white picture. That's one of the styles, black and white. And you take the picture. And then later you're like, oh, I really regret taking it in black and white. And back in the day, doing a black and white photo, you dropped all the color data and saved it. That data, if you don't have the original, it's gone. In iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, all that data is still there. So even though you took a black and white style, all the color data is still there, and you can go into photographic styles and change it to a color style, and the color comes back, which is very clever because it means that the photos are a little bit larger in file size, but they can reprocess your image later based on the style, based on what you want it to look like. But the fun thing is, if you're on an iPhone 14 running iOS 18 and you have a family member has an iPhone 16 and took a photo with a photographic style, you can edit it and change the style. Um, the same thing goes the other way. Older photos can't use the new photographic styles technique. They'll use the old uh what is it, styles or themes technique instead. That's like Instagram. So it's weird because we're in this kind of in between state where different photos have different functions. Also, the fact that they named it the same thing as the old name, but it's totally different. Because the old photographic styles let you set a style at a low level, but then it would process the entire picture, so you couldn't change it after the fact. And now, because they've stored data, you can reprocess it after the fact and change it. So it's, I don't know, they must really love the name photographic styles because they kept it. Anyway, Photos has been updated to support it. Like most of the stuff that they do, like live photos, like portrait mode. Basically, if you've got a special kind of picture from Apple, from an Apple device, Photos will be able to work with it no matter whether the device you're editing on or viewing on is capable of capturing that thing. Apple tries to make it so like a Mac can do photographic styles, even though the Mac doesn't take pictures like that. It can edit them. And an old iPad that doesn't do photographic styles, I guess no iPads do photographic styles version 2, they can still edit them, which is good. So there are a bunch of things like that I have to put in my book because they announced all of that after I'd finished the book. So there will be an update for all of that. Um, let's see. I think that's all I wanted to talk about Photos. I have one little teaser, which is I am in the process. The book's got a little bit of an update on this, but I'm going to try to do more on this. I'm in a process of ordering a bunch of books, and I need to do a bunch of calendars because there are like 4 or 5 different apps now that plug into the Photos app that let you build books. And the books, they all look pretty good, and the interfaces are all a little bit different. And I want to do a little bit more with that. So the book mentions the apps, and they're all okay. Some of them are very expensive. All of them are kind of expensive, but I will put in a plug here in general, which is a different version of what I said earlier, which is why do you take all these photos and then not look at them? I believe very strongly that one of the things you should do is print your photos. And we make a calendar every year that's got our photos on it using a online printing service. We have a bunch of frames in our living room where we do large format. We go to Shutterfly and order large format prints, like, poster size of our kids, update them every few years, and they live on our walls. Um, you can order actual prints and put them in frames. There are lots of different ways to do it. Um, Christmas cards, obviously, but like getting your photos into the world, getting them into your physical world so that you see them as you go by is another way to do it. Doesn't all have to just be on your iPad screen. It can also be in your house. So I covered that a little bit in the book, but I need to do some more work to get it updated because there used to only be two, and now, like I said, there's four or five that do this, and they all do it a little differently, and they all try to do like an auto layout. Which, as a control freak, I'm like, no, I will choose every single picture and exactly how it's cropped and all of that, and you can do that too. You just have to tell it to stop and not do that part intelligently because I want to do it. I've not yet seen an AI interface for photo books that pleases me at all. So that's a place that AI needs to work on, I guess. Okay, I have been talking for 40 minutes and I'm going to stop talking now, and I am happy to answer your questions about photos or anything else. Thank you for listening. That is my brain this summer. That was it. That has what I've been doing all summer.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unmute yourself because everybody was muted if you want to ask a question. Or raise your hand. Rick.
I just bought it, but it didn't download.
Okay. Well,
What I haven't bought a book from Take Control in a while. I think the last.
they probably sent you an email. I don't have anything to do with their systems, so I don't know how that works. But they probably sent you an email that's got a link to download it. And if not, I'm sure if you reply to the support email, Joe, who is a very nice man and runs the whole show there, will get back to you.
You're right. There it is. Thank you.
So we got to mention there's a user group deal for 30% off. I'm not going to put the code in this because it's a public video. So after the recording stops, there was also the link was in the email that went out this morning to this meeting. And it's for this book. It's for all the Take Control books. That's an ongoing thing.
That's great. And they've got a bundle, I think, with Jeff Carlson's photography book, which is a great book too, if you want to buy them both.
And if you own a previous version, it's $5 to upgrade.
That's it. Right. Yeah. This is a new edition, so there's an upgrade fee, but you don't have to pay full freight if you've already bought the book in some other form. There's a note in the chat from Julie about editing photos from a travel log, added titles. Now I want to share the album, but send them to my travel companions with all the data. And when I airdrop or save to a thumb drive, the order changes, the titles fall off. Yeah, this is a problem because Apple really wants you to use their shared thing. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the problem is that what you really need to do is share it and share that with them. You doing an iCloud share, but you're going to lose some of the data if you do. You can do iCloud share, which is not quite the same. You share via iCloud and then they can add it to their library and stuff, so they'll get the data. The other thing you could do is generate a PDF or a slideshow as an export to like have more control over it and then also send them the files just as shared files. But this is a case where, yeah, Apple kind of wants you to be in their system or not at all, unfortunately.
Bill has his hand up and then Jan.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Because I've spent hours putting this album together and I tried at the beginning to make it a shared album.
Right.
And it wouldn't allow me to make some of the edits that I needed to make. And then my travel companion still couldn't see the titles and it scrambled the order, which was, defeating the whole purpose of doing a travel log.
Well, absolutely. Well, so one thing to try if you haven't tried it already is select all the photos in the album and do share, which is not the same as making a shared album.
Right.
And see what that gets you. Because
I tried it with about 10 of the photos because there's about 400 total. And I know I probably can't send that many by airdrop, but I tried with like 10 of them.
Right.
And said, okay, let's airdrop them from my iPad to his Mac,
Oh, so
and
so
it dropped everything.
so here's what you want to do: select them all, choose share, and then choose copy iCloud link. That
And I
generates an
tried that
iCloud.
too,
Did
and
you
it
try that?
still scrambled them.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And putting them
I
on a
tried
thumb
it. I
drive
I
doesn't work
tried.
either. Yeah.
I tried.
Okay. Well, I
The
thought I was missing something.
so my suggestion is you could try because you mentioned a thumb drive.
Uh-huh.
If you do export photos,
Yeah.
export album, you can say include title, keywords, and caption, and you can choose the file name to be uh sequential, which I think oh, there may be a way to do it there, but it's not going to be great because it's just going to be files in a folder.
Yeah. I
I'm going to
was
say,
thinking about just
okay,
numbering every photo first and
here,
then put the title,
okay,
like
this,
one is day
yeah,
one or whatever.
here's a wacky idea that you could try, which is, on the Mac, assuming you're using a Mac for this,
Yeah. Yeah.
is select all your photos and you're going to need to install if you haven't already, under the, where is it? It's create under the file menu.
Okay.
Um, I would say create a book, and you there are free apps in the App Store.
Right.
Uh, that you if you haven't downloaded them, you can download them from the App Store, and there's even a link in there. Something like Mimeo or Motif would be good,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure because I think all of them will let you build the book and then save a PDF.
Ah.
So you wouldn't necessarily need to print the book. You should check, like do a test first. But that
Okay.
would be one way to do it is to build a book, even if you don't actually print it, even if it's literally one photo per page and it's just all the photos in sequence. If you did that and you can get a PDF out, I know that's a long way to go, but then you would get a PDF that was under your total control. And I think they even let you do an option to have the layout include text like a title. So I'm sorry, that's like a really bad workaround, but that's one thing you could try.
Well, the ultimate goal is to get a book out of it. So
There
one
you
of my
go.
Okay.
second questions is how to add text to the book, not just photos.
Yeah, so depends on the app because there are, like I said, there are like 4 or 5 now, but most of them give you layout options. Some of them, okay, because I just did this. Some of them anyway, there are layout options where the way it works is like you say 2 up, and then it's got a bunch of different ways those 2 photos on that page can get laid out. So some of them will be like 2 up and 2 up with text. Some of them will be 2 up, and some of the layout options will have text. Some of them you have the template that you choose, the style of book, what it looks like, what font, what colors and stuff, and the templates will be with or without text. So it varies based on the app you choose, but in a lot of them, that's basically what it is you have. And then others, I think you may actually can even say there's like an optional text box and you can just type in it. So, but there definitely are apps that will let you put photos on pages and have text. That could be the title or a description.
Super.
Maybe you could try exporting the photos out and building a keynote with them however you wanted and
You
save
could do
that
that
in
too.
the PDF.
And then that's easy to go to PDF. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great
Okay.
idea.
Very good. Thank
There
you.
may even be to Salsagoian, I should know this already. Photos to Keynote, Apple scripts. I feel like there's if you Google photos to Keynote Apple script, you will find like some scripts by Sal Segovian, who used to be at Apple, who's the Apple script guy. He actually has some scripts that let you select photos and then run the script, and it just takes them and builds a keynote presentation with them. I don't know. There's lots of ways to go here. Sorry, I don't have they should here's the problem is there's like a bunch of different ways to do shared albums in iCloud, and they're inconsistent, and they're generated from different places, and like the shared albums are a lower resolution, the iCloud shared albums are a higher resolution, but they have limitations. I really wish they would do a better job of getting their act together with that stuff, and they've been really slow to do it.
Me
So,
too. Thank
sorry,
you.
I can't help more. I tried.
Thank you.
Bill and Jan. Bill
Oh,
first. Go ahead.
okay. I'm a little frustrated in this new world because basically my photos that I take are no longer individual. They are part of a bizarre database that
Yep.
I need Apple's tools to go through. I want to be able to pull out my photos, see the EXIF information, edit them directly, handle them as individual pieces. And
So the photos,
I just get totally lost
yep.
with this universe and Apple's insistence on the tools. How can I get them out and handle them again like I always used to?
Well, you can always export them out and use a different tool. If you use Apple's tool, there is a way to manage it in the Finder and not import and have it be a reference. But
I'm on iPad and
yeah, well,
phones.
no, well that's it.
Also
That's the problem.
iCloud. I use iCloud
The lack of
photos on a third-party operating system.
Yeah,
I
so
want control of my document.
yeah, I get it. I mean, Apple has decided that because it's too complicated to manage files, that they don't want a one-to-one relationship between a file manager and your photos. And that's Apple's choice. And you can resist it, but you're going to have to use somebody else's tools for that. I will say, though, that if what you want is to have control over the file, I believe on the Mac and the iPhone and the iPad, you can choose to edit a photo in another app. And what it does when it does that is it is taking the file and handing it to the other app. And then you edit in the other app, because I've done this with Photomator and Pixelmator. And then you make the edits to that. And that is the JPEG or RAW or whatever it is. And you make the edits. And then when you save it and close it in that app, it puts it back in your iCloud photo library, but it's still the file and it just got sent back. And you can still revert, because remember, any photo that's in the photos library that you edit, you can revert back to the original. The original is always saved. So you can edit, like I can edit a photo in Photoshop on my Mac, and it's the file, or a version of the file, but it's a single file with all the data, and I can do anything I want. And when I press save and close, it goes back to photos. So it's not like completely walled off, but in terms of like managing it file by file, yeah, Apple has basically decided that it doesn't want to do that.
Okay. Now this goes on to this database file, which is my photos library. Apple is in there doing all these wonderful things with it, but is that information mine, or is Apple making claim to it? Who actually owns it?
I'm pretty sure you own it. It all happens on device.
But they're making all sorts of decisions about what to do with my personal material. What else are they doing with it?
I don't know what you mean by they're making decisions about what to do with your personal material. They've got
the AI that goes in to do all these things. They're using it. Apple Intelligence is taking that information to learn more.
No. All of this happens on your device. It doesn't happen in the cloud. They don't even sync all that. This is why when you get a new device and you log into iCloud, it has to sit there and churn and learn about your photo library again. Is it has to rebuild all that data, because it does not go into the cloud. It never leaves your computer.
Okay.
So Apple's not training on it. Apple doesn't know about it. It's all of the identity. There's a beach here. There's a horse here. The only thing that gets transmitted is stuff that you personally label. So if you select a face and say, this is this person, that gets transmitted. If you say this is the title, that gets transmitted.
Okay.
But the stuff that's generated out of the algorithm never leaves your device, which is inconvenient if you get a new iPhone, because your iPhone's got to look at all the photos in your library again which will make it warm, and it runs overnight, and it's a whole thing. But the reason that happens is because Apple doesn't want that data in its cloud. It wants it to stay on the device, and it stays there.
Thank you.
Dan.
Okay. What? Did you say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, after Apple started Photos, previously there was iPhoto and Aperture. With photos, they took away a feature that I really want, and I'm just wondering if you can tell me it's back. When I search for a photo and I find it, I don't know what albums it's in.
Oh.
They took away the ability to see what albums photos are in. Is that possibly back?
That is such a good, well, I'm gonna look.
It's such an obvious thing. How come everybody else doesn't use this?
I know, right? So it's the status. Yes.
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 Oh, I'm so
let's see.
excited.
Okay, I'm gonna really. This is very exciting. We're doing this in real time, but what I'm trying to see here is if it's true on the iPhone too. Let's see. Oh, that's wrong.
Dan has been asking this question for a long time.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that on the Mac, you absolutely can.
That's my main.
And I don't think
device.
it's there on the iPhone and the iPad. So on the Mac, if you right click on an image, there is one of the items in the little control click, right click, two finger click, whatever you want to call it, the contextual menu is show in album. So if it's in an album, it will have show in album and it will list the albums that it's in. And then if you select, it will show it in that album. It'll jump to that album.
That's what she wants.
That's
fantastic.
it. Yay. Well, that one, finally, I got one.
And
how long has that been there? She's been asking this for years.
I don't know.
I've been sending feedback for 10 years, I think. I don't know
Maybe
when
if it's only in iOS,
I don't know.
only in what are you looking at in Sequoia?
I'm looking at Sequoia. So
Yeah,
I don't know if
there.
it's in a previous version or not, but I can tell you it's in macOS 15 for sure.
Okay, can I ask something else?
Sure.
I upgraded my iPad, which I don't use very often, so it probably has the latest version of Photos. And I don't see library. Is there an equivalent to library in there? I just took one quick look at it. But.
Yeah, so you can the sidebar that has all the things like you do on the Mac, you just have to I think it's in the upper left corner, there's a little icon to show the sidebar or show and hide the sidebar. If you show the sidebar, then you'll see the sort of like familiar stuff like albums and all of that.
But you can't just go what if you want to go through your 15,000 pictures?
It doesn't say photos, it says library. I mean, instead of library, it says photos.
It says, yeah, but that's
okay.
That's what it is. It is there. So on if you're on 18, when it opens up, the grid is at I can even show you here. The grid is at the top and the collections are at the bottom. And then if you want, you can bring open the sidebar and it says photos at the top, which is basically this main view, but that's got your whole grid. Which
Great.
this is a brand new iPad mini, and you can see it hasn't done that thing. It's still loading all the data in the background because it just got set up yesterday. So it's still processing all of those photos. And if I did a search on here, it would probably not all be there yet because it takes time to do that. But it's still there.
So if it reprocesses on another device, will it come up with different results for
Yes. Yes, sometimes it will.
The results sync?
No.
So you end up with different results.
Yes, yeah, you can. You can if you search for a dog in one place and dog in another place, you may see different dogs and things that aren't dogs. That's one of the downsides of it. What I would like them to do more syncing of things that you train, right? That's the idea. Is if you say that this doesn't have this, I think maybe some of that they do with faces. They definitely do. If you say this is not that person, that anything you contribute to the training process, it tries to sync. So that stuff comes over, like I said. So it syncs your contributions to the training, but not the machine data, for two reasons. One is privacy, and one is I think as you got different versions of the algorithm on different devices. And so if you've got an iPad that's got iOS 18 and you've got a Mac that's running Sonoma, they're running different algorithms for that. And so they could get in a fight. And so basically you use the state-of-the-art algorithm for whatever OS is on your device.
Okay, Kenji got his hand up.
I frequently find that to find a photo that at a place where I knew where I took it, that the surest way to find the photos is to go to places and then zoom in on the map. And usually requires zooming in and in and in and in and in and in and in.
Yep.
And I wish there were a more direct way to do that. And
Yep.
sometimes just describing the location might work, but more often than not.
Yeah. So it's called Map now. New big change in iOS 18 and Sequoia. It's now called Map. It's a great feature. You still sort of have to do that. The difference is it's all based on Apple's geotagging database. So if you took it in a place that has a name that is in Apple's geotag database, you can search for it. But it's not as sophisticated. I've had this too, where I have searched for something and it's like if it knows that that place has a name or it's in a business that is named, it will find it. But if it's in just like sometimes it'll be like on a beach somewhere, to use that beach example again, and the beach isn't named. And so therefore I can't just search for the beach because the beach doesn't, that for whatever reason, yeah, the beach isn't, I'm looking actually at the name of a favorite beach of ours. And let's see. Yeah, and it doesn't find the photos that are on that beach because for whatever reason those photos aren't tagged with a name. So if I look at Limantor Beach, which is in Point Reyes, those photos are all tagged as, or some of them are Limantor Beach, some of them are Inverness, California. It's inconsistent, and those don't show up in the search index. So that's I agree. Actually, that's a really good thing that Apple should do a better job of, is trying to infer location names from place data and put it in the search index. And I think they're just not doing as good a job on that as they should. They do it for, again, if you're in cities, it's actually sometimes even better. Like if I search for Oracle Park, I will get all Giants ballpark photos that I've taken. But in other places, like some of the Hawaii searches I do, it just doesn't. I mean, if it's not the name of a city or something, it may just be, it doesn't have enough granular data. So, but the map, as a tip for everybody, it is amazing. Use the map feature. I was able to get and I mentioned this in the book, like my wife and I took a walk on a beach in Hawaii. My wife and my kids and I took a walk at the Haleakala summit on Maui. And you can zoom in on the summit and you can see we took a picture here and then here and then here and then here. You can follow our walk. It is that granular if you get down to it. It's pretty amazing. And certainly it's nice when you're I want to find a picture that I took at the Cal football stadium, and you can just zoom into California Memorial Stadium and click, and it's well, here are all 800 pictures you took at the football game, Jason. And I'm great. Okay, I just want this one. So it could be better.
Can you train it on places?
No, I think what you could do is you go in with the map and then you select all those photos, and you could probably put a keyword in or a tag and put the name, and then you would be able to find it later via search. And those would sync over iCloud. Because if you do it, it'll usually sync over iCloud.
Oh, so things you do will sync, but
that's
things that the automation is doing will not, because of privacy.
That's the idea. It doesn't always work that way, but that's the general principle, is that if you do it, it will sync via iCloud. If the machine does it, it just leaves it local on the system. But it can have benefits, because if you train, it'll find 100 photos with a particular person's face in it, and it's not going to remember that. But if it asks you, because this is part of the face training, it'll say check all the boxes of the ones that are your daughter, and you check these and uncheck those, and then you say okay. That gets saved. That gets synced. And that helps the next iPad, the next iPhone figure out who that face is because you did something active to identify people who, faces that are or are not a particular person. That stuff gets synced, which is great because it means that the next device to be added and to have to search through your photo library doesn't have to ask you. It already knows your answer to that question, and that can aid it. But it's only that stuff, only the stuff that you actively do that gets synced.
I think people should look at the faces and train it and go through yes and no.
You should.
You build it and
helps.
then it builds some more and you got to come back and then it gets
Yep.
better and better on each
Yep.
person you do.
Absolutely.
I found that in people, there was me plus two other people that were also me but unnamed. So I named them me, and it still kept them as three separate people. And in the iPad app, I tried dragging one over the other, and that didn't work. But
Be able to
I
merge.
tried that on the Mac, and it did work, and eventually it populated back.
I think you can merge them on the iPad, but it's weird. It's not as straightforward as it is on the Mac.
Anybody else, or give Jan another chance?
Yeah, Jan.
That's something
All
else.
right.
Oh, I thought Apple had a good way of grouping pictures back when they had events, or there was another name for them too. Where all the pictures you took at one time or one day were
Right.
in one place. Why did they get rid of that?
Apple's ways are mysterious. I don't know. All I can do is look at the app and see what they changed. I think, yeah, that's a good question because they used to do it based on, they tried to identify events. I think they've decided that it was more efficient to break it up based on days or based on travel, and so they created trips and days. And then beyond that, you just use the library grid. I think that they just figured that was a better way for them to do it. Honestly, I liked the idea of events, but a lot of times their decisions about what was an event were weird. And I wonder if they just decided that they weren't reliable enough and it was better to just sort of separate based on day or based on the trips concept. But they don't tell me these things.
In iPhoto, when you got to people started getting thousands and thousands, every time you import it, it will make an event. It would just be untitled event. It was just a long string of events. Sometimes they would group them. Sometimes they would be broken apart, and you had to drag them. And it didn't work very well, really.
Yeah.
And you got lots of photos.
But it's a great question. Why? And every now and then, I talk to somebody who's involved on the photos team. Every now and then. And those are really interesting conversations because they probably don't talk to many people outside of Apple who have spent as much time with their app as I have, digging as deep as I have. And those can be really illuminating, but it's only every so often. I did run into the woman who is in charge. Her name is Della. She's in charge of photos at the iPhone launch. And John Gruber and I talked her ear off for like 15 minutes and she was showing stuff and we were like, about the photographic styles. We're like, what's going on there? And she's like, okay, well, there's data that's being saved with the Heath in the package. And then we use that later to rebuild the data. And it was great. But like those moments are so fleeting. So usually I spend all summer trying to figure out what's changed. But what I rarely get the answer to is why. It's just Apple just does what it does. So we just have to guess.
I have a question about doing a take control book. Do you find that the format is challenging, writing the book so that it makes a functional ebook in the take control?
Yeah, I mean, it's not what I do. This is the thing is I get the impression that most of the take control authors write multiple take control books, and I only have the one. And I know every year it frustrates Joe a little bit because they've got their style, which is sort of like the Tidbits style because it came out of Tidbits originally. It was part of Tidbits, and they use the Apple style guidelines as well, which none of which I do for my own stuff on my own site, and so. I never remember, like they refer to everything in a different way than I do. And the style choices are different. Writing at this detail is not something that I usually do on 6 Colors or Macworld. So like literally like click this, then do this to do this thing is not a thing I normally do. There are lots of screenshots that I'm not used to doing, like, because you want to see every single thing. Honestly, the ebook and book format is funny because there used to be everything used to be books, and now it's not. And the truth is that if I were probably starting today, I would probably consider doing this as a video course instead, because it would probably be actually easier to do in a lot of ways, because I could literally just talk while I show you what's going on. Instead, I have to describe it. But um this is what we built, and I keep updating it every year, and people keep buying it, so it seems to help people, and so we keep doing it, and that's great. But it is unlike anything else I do, and there are definitely summer weekends where I am just out here in the garage frantically. Seriously, it's like I got an iPhone, I got an iPad, I've got a laptop, all running the beta, and I'm checking on this and taking a screenshot and airdropping it and converting it and putting it in Nicest Writer, which is what we use to build the book, and changing the description. And it's just a weird process. But the good thing at the end is that I feel like I know a lot about photos. And then undoubtedly, when I talk to somebody who's used photos for 10 years, like here, they ask me a question and I go, I've never thought of that, and I have no idea what the answer is. So it contains many, many uncharted depths, I guess, but I try.
I guess one follow-up question on that. Do they give you, do they give you an editor, perhaps Joe himself, to work with you?
Yeah, I've had a bunch of different editors. A couple of my former colleagues at Macworld edited versions of the book. Joe did this latest one, but I've had, because they were working on other books. But I had Shelley McFarland, who is actually she was one of the features editors when we were buddies back in the early days when we came over from Mac User to Macworld. She's now the editor of the alumni magazine at the Oregon State University, which is interesting. But she edits some stuff and writes some stuff for Joe. And then Kelly Turner, who was edited our ebooks at Macworld actually for years, the Macworld Super Guide ebook series. She edits some of Joe's books too. But this time I actually just worked with Joe, so who's great and writes a lot of books himself and runs the whole thing from Canada. Any last questions? I think I've got a hand from Jerry.
Yeah, I I have a shared photo library with myself and my wife, and on my Mac, photos are all in albums, and you can open the album and see the photos. On her Mac, many of the albums are empty. Is
Yes.
this a bug or?
iCloud shared photos does not share albums, and it's
Oh.
infuriating. And
Oh.
they do not share albums. The
Well, it took
only
a long time.
workaround, and it's just they just haven't done it. It's not a bug. It's just not a feature that they've implemented, but it's infuriating. I would say my workaround thing you can try is you select everything that's in an album, and then you do get info and you give it a tag or a keyword, because if that syncs, then on
Yeah.
your wife's computer, you can search for it, or you can do a smart album, and all of the things with that keyword will then go in. But boy, you don't want to do that for every album. So
Yeah, I got a lot of them.
yeah. So that's unfortunately, no, this is every year. This is the first thing that my friend Stephen Hackett, who does the Relay Podcast Network with Mike Hurley, um, this is his number one thing, which is that he and his wife have the same thing, which is like, why do the albums not share? I don't have an answer. I mean, obviously there must be some technical reason why it's complicated, but
It took
it's
them
so frustrating.
Took them a long time just to allow
Just
you
to share photos.
share.
I know.
And
I know.
really an important
Yeah.
feature for a family.
Yeah. Yeah. So what ends up happening is somebody, I guess, becomes the keeper of the albums, and the other person just doesn't worry about it. And I don't know. It would be at the top of my list of things they need to fix, but it's been 2 years now and they haven't fixed it.
Okay, the other is a question I once asked you in email and you didn't know an answer, but maybe you've learned it since. It's
Okay.
with shared album. Is there a way to get the share sheet to add photos directly to the shared album? You know, I would pick up a picture off of Instagram. One of the kids posts something on Instagram. So we go and pick up that picture and want to add it to photos using the share sheet, but it goes into my personal album, and then I have to constantly go and move them to the shared photo album. Is there a way to change the default so that it'll go directly?
So where, oh, is this like when you're importing?
Yeah, importing a picture off of Instagram into photos.
Oh, wow. Well, I still don't know the answer to that question. My guess is probably no. My guess is probably that they just don't even, um, well, okay, so the problem, I think the problem is that shared albums are not albums.
Oh,
Shared albums are like a weird other thing
oh, this
that
is
is not
shared
albums.
photo album. The whole shared photo album.
Right, but it's in share, it's in the sidebar, it's in sharing shared albums, right?
Ah,
Shared albums aren't albums. This is I know, but shared albums aren't albums, and items in your
yeah,
library have to be in your library, and then you can put them in the shared album, which
right.
means when you bring them in, they need to live somewhere in the shared, and that's probably what's happening, is that it's viewing it as while I'm bringing it in, I can put it in one of your albums, but it doesn't think of the shared albums at all. So that, I guess, see, this app has been around so long that both of these last two topics I think are similar, where it's like, why is it like that? And I think the answer is probably technical debt. I think the answer is that they built that a certain way, and then they added this other feature, and they didn't think about this thing when they added this thing, and now they're just like, well,
Yeah,
that's not. And like I said, shared albums as a concept, I feel like they're kind of running away from in favor of iCloud shared albums, which are different and are better, but are inconsistently displayed in the interface. So in the end, maybe they could hook up the iCloud shared albums where, they're public facing and you can download all the full quality originals and you can view them on the web. And it's like, they're really nice. But like that's super inconsistent. And then coming from an import, which is already, I think Apple doesn't think a lot about imported
yeah.
files because they're mostly thinking about things you take with your iPhone. So that's probably why. Again, it's a mystery. I don't have an answer about why, but I can speculate that there's probably some complex reasons why they're not making that workflow easier. I'm sorry, it's not easier.
Jason has had a very long day.
Oh boy, this is true. It's been one of those days.
So,
So thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. That
Well,
was
thank
very
you all.
informative.
Thanks a
Nice,
lot.
nice
You're
seeing you
great. So
again.
grateful. So grateful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Jason.
Brenda,
See you
please
later.
email.
Bye. Take care.
So hold on, everybody. We'll stop this recording and we'll do a general Q&A. Anybody who's watching this is going to be public on YouTube, and we're going to do Q&A. The link will be on the DVMUG BBS. So see you in a bit.